Hi there. Welcome to Creation Station Monthly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. This is the monthly show where we take a good 45 minutes to an hour to talk to two really interesting strangers who have never met until just before this show started about a topic that they're both passionate about. Today, we're going to talk about ocean environments because next Saturday, June 7th, is World Oceans Day, and that makes our two experts help me be smarter about what oceans are. Well, about the things in the oceans, I suppose, is more appropriately. Daniel, I'm going to have Meg go first, and then you'll just follow up and answer with your nutshell of who you are. But Meg, tell us about who you are and what you do.
Hi, my name is Meg Mindlin. I am a graduate student at Walla Walla University, and I study octopuses and how they acclimate to their environment using a molecular mechanism known as RNA editing.
So she's making Jurassic World by editing octopuses.
Not quite. I mean, they're doing the editing themselves, so I'm not really editing the octopuses at all. I'm simply observing how they're editing themselves and how that changes with increased acidification due to climate change.
Daniel, tell us about what you're doing.
I have a Bachelor of Arts in Ecosystem Science, so while I can recognize the words Meg is using, I don't understand how they all come together.
That's okay.
But that's why we meet and have different parts of the field that we work in, right? To connect with science communication and all that jazz. And that's my background. I'm from Pennsylvania originally. I started off studying terrestrial sciences at the University of Miami. I studied abroad in Kenya, and that taught me that I wasn't big into field work, but that I wanted to go into the business and communications aspect of things. So now, after working at PBS Kids and Disney's Animal Kingdom and museums in South Florida, I now focus on community relations and sponsorships and the business side of this, in addition to the education, bringing to light cool things that people like Meg would be doing, but on this side of the coast in Miami, Broward, South Florida side of things. And I don't want to be too bold, Bob, but after hearing Meg give her background, I kind of have an introductory question.
Go for it.
Yeah.
So I love, Meg, the media and filmic aspects of our field. And I was told I had to watch a documentary called My Octopus Teacher, I believe it's called. And I, after watching it, as someone who communicates science, I sat there and I wept for about 20 minutes afterwards. So being a specialist in that area, like, if you watched, did you see it? What did you think about it?
I have seen it. Mainly because it won some awards, so it's now like a super well-known film, like all across. It's one of the first things that people ask me is, what did I think about My Octopus Teacher? I think
I'm so cliche then, I feel like.
No, it's a good question, and I always feel bad because I think I have a little bit of a controversial opinion in that I don't like it as much as everybody else does.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think for one, because I am somebody who already researches octopuses and knows a great deal about them, I'm coming at it from a different perspective than somebody who is the primary audience of being never knows much about octopuses, hasn't learned really much about them. And so when I watched the film, I wasn't really so much as focusing on sort of the like octopus background of it. The first thing I noticed was how he starts off the documentary, which I think is the weirdest part to me, and what like kind of took my attention away from everything, which is that he had marital problems and family problems, and instead of addressing those problems, he went to go spend time with an octopus. And there's some value to all of that. You want to like clear your thoughts, clear your brain, but it was very like, you didn't have to start the documentary off this way, because now I just kind of think that, you're abandoning your family to spend time with an octopus.
Well, hopefully my first impression was more productive than his then.
Yeah, so I think that's like it's an opinion that like people don't really realize until like they go back and watch it another time. And so like
Right.
when I was first watching it, it was the first thing I picked up on. And so that kind of just like weirdly tainted the film for me. I was like, oh, this is a little bit weird to start it off. I think it's beautiful in a lot of ways of like, you know, explaining this relationship that
Yeah.
you know, we can have with wildlife. And I think in a lot of ways those stories are really important. I just kind of don't love that it was more so a human perspective film than an
Right.
educational film. But that also may just be my taste in documentaries, and what I want out of a nature documentary is less so the human perspective and more so the educational perspective. And his was like really just the human focused perspective.
So in terms of the
And
human,
Daniel,
oh, go ahead.
No, I just want, because all you said was meek, and you didn't really explain what meek is.
Yes.
And because you guys do that same sort of thing of filming, like Meg was just talking about.
And thank you, Robert, for circling back on that. I was just so intrigued automatically because you know, an octopus is such an interesting species and their vast intelligence. So, you know, the communicating conservation or just straight biological facts is so interesting because there's a different entry point for everybody, and that's kind of exactly what we do here at the Meek. So as we can all relate to in science, everything is the large overblown acronym. So we are the Marine Environmental Education Center. Perfect timing with Robert pulling up our website, and right there you see our sea turtle captain. So we actually take care of two turtles, and people ask us, the first question is often, when do you re-release them? And the two gals that we have with us are our permanent residents. So not all sea turtles can be rehabilitated. So what's unique about ours is that they will be our forever residents, and they live, this is an extra layer to the Meek interesting part of our human tale, in the former swimming pool of the owners who built the house. So I'll be sure to wind back down there in a few minutes and show you guys what that pool looks like. But we are a historic house, historic for South Florida, 1941. So it's latter Art Deco, early mid-century, part cabin in the woods. There's really only one owner with two different wives, and they had it all the way up until the early 2000s. So we get to preserve this house. We do educational programs here, which use our turtles as a gateway. And Meg, I'm sure, you know, and learning about your science communication in a little bit, you know, everybody has a different entry point to caring and understanding. So we kind of catalyze our messaging by our sea turtles, but then we're right here on the beach too. So there's a lot of malleability that we have, and some people come here just to look at the historic architecture and then find out that we have two turtles and they want to come back. So we have to constantly pivot and see what people are interested in. But in terms of career enrichment, for us, that's awesome. You know, it keeps us moving and grooving and keeping it moving forward.
Meg, do you deal with captives also, or rescues, or is it more just out in the ocean?
So we capture octopuses for our lab experiments, and there's a lot of different reasons and varieties on why we do that. The lab that I'm in, Dr. Kurt Onthink's lab, is primarily a physiology lab. So a lot of things of understanding their behavior and their physiology and how they react to their environment. And so we do go out and capture wild octopuses, but the vast majority of the time we also get to re-release them. So it's really great to sort of like be able to study octopuses and also like bring them back to their natural environment, even though, you know, that's not always 100% the case in all types of animal research. But yeah, we do work with octopuses. Yeah.
So my question is, did you always know you wanted to work with them? Like, what catalyzed your interest? Because there's a very unique animal to study, and they often have the reputation for one of the most, and correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but they have a reputation for being one of the most intelligent marine species out there. Is that true?
Yeah, I'd say most intelligent invertebrate. I think, like, you know, in terms of comparison to other marine animals out there, I don't know if, like, they certainly are intelligent, but like, I don't know if they stand the test of time against like a dolphin or something like that. Like, it's also just like different environments and different reasons for being intelligent, and like the different needs that you have. Like, it's kind of why like I don't like comparing intelligence of one animal to another, because it's really about how the organism like is built to deal with their specific environment and how they're best, you know, in that environment. And so the comparison can kind of get a little murky. But in terms of like how I got to this was actually kind of not random in such a way. I started off as primarily an artist. I was somebody who was pretty sure I was going to go to art school, wanted to be a full-time artist. I was actively doing art since I could hold a pencil. I was, you know, being paid to do art in high school. I made bands' album covers, and I did music photography, and I designed a bunch of t-shirts and merchandise and all sorts of stuff, just full-blown art kid. And I had done that my whole life. And so by the time I got to my senior year, I was really just burnt out. I no longer found a lot of joy in art. It became a job and not something that I just did because I liked doing it and I had fun doing it. And so I was kind of looking for what else I could do with my life that wasn't art. And one of my biggest art inspirations had always been the ocean. And so I wanted to go and make ocean documentaries. And so I, instead of applying to art programs my senior year, I basically surprised everyone and applied only to marine biology programs and said,
Did you
no.
know anything about filming before you decided this?
Well, no, I was a concert photographer. So I did
a concert photographer.
Mm-hmm. So I did.
See, folks, this is creative people just go all over the place. This is amazing.
Yeah, so I did concert photography for Live Nation and Golden Voice in high school, and
that's awesome.
I did like interviews. Like I interviewed the Dirty Heads at one time, like when I was 17 years old, for their new beer label that they just came out with, which that was really fun and exciting. But I really loved documentaries, and I was like, you know what, I have a lot of beef with some ocean documentaries, and I feel like I can make them better. And I was like, you know, the way that I can make an ocean documentary better is by getting a marine biology degree. And so I was like, you know, if I'm going to do it, I want to be educated. And so I went and got my marine biology degree freshman year of my undergrad at UC Santa Cruz. I took a how to write a research paper class where I wrote about how the octopus would be affected by climate change. And within that paper, I discovered RNA editing. And I thought that it was so cool. I was like, I don't understand any of this. I've never been a heavy science person. I don't feel like I know molecular biology that well, but I know this is cool. And so,
are you using CRISPR?
No, it's not CRISPR. It's different than CRISPR, but it could be an alternative to CRISPR as just like another type of gene therapy. But RNA editing is a molecular mechanism that octopuses, squid, and cuttlefish just do in their body in the same way that we like alter our own little edit our RNA and everything to sort of like maintain our immune responses and things like that. They just do it to a much higher extent. And so I was like, wow, this is really cool. I want to learn all about this. So I changed my major to to molecular biology, joined an RNA lab, and just went.
It's like mind blowing to me.
I know,
like the entry point to.
This is why we do the show, is to find these
and it turned
wonderful
out that,
things.
My art background was really helpful in me learning all these things because I had no idea about any of it. I wasn't confident in the field. So I was really good at asking questions. I had no fear of asking a stupid question. And then 2, I had the art background and knowledge so that, you know, when I was met with things that were complex and I didn't understand, I could draw it out.
Yeah.
And that really helped. And then that really helped me learn these things. And then on top of it, I was, you know, in study group. All my friends were in the same major, so all the same classes. So we were all studying together. And so I was the one in the study group on the whiteboard, drawing it all out and teaching it to everybody else. And so then I was like, wait, not only does drawing it help me, but teaching it also helps me. And I think I'm kind of good at teaching people things. And so then the science communication background came into play.
Boy, Meg, if I would have had you as my teacher for physiology and chemistry as an undergrad, I may have only had to take it one time.
Yeah, I mean chemistry is still something I feel really terrible because when I first went into marine biology, I was like, I don't need to know chemistry. I was like, I don't need. And then turns out later in I got into a research lab and I was like, oh wait, actually chemistry is everything that I'm doing. I do need to know chemistry. So I'm right there with you. I rushed through general chemistry and then hunkered down in organic chemistry. And I
So
think
I'm
that
hearing
was
I have to do a chemistry monthly show at one point here in the future.
chemistry's crazy. Chemistry's so cool. Once you get it, like it's very cool. But like for me, the
I
organic
still have PTSD from Chem 1, so I will watch maybe as a fly on the wall. And it's interesting, your story, because I started an international relations major
Mhm,
and then I wanted to focus in. And so I thought I wanted to do a Bachelor of Science in Conservation Biology.
mhm,
And I was really struggling with the math and the
mhm.
chemistry parts of it.
Yeah.
So I did a zookeeping internship,
Mhm.
and my curator was like, "You are talking more to the people than feeding the animals. So think about education." I was like, "What?" And then I interned at Disney's Animal Kingdom theme park in Orlando. And at the end of my internship there, I spoke with the director who was an animal behaviorist. I told her, I was like, I want to go and follow your path. I want to do a PhD in animal behavior. And she goes, my greatest advice to you. I go, yeah. And she's like, do not do that. And I was like, what? Because
Oh,
it's like you idolize people and look up to them.
yeah.
And I'll never forget the conversation. She's like, that's not you. She goes, you love to communicate a message. She goes, what is your story that you want to share? What is your connection? And so she's like, first thing, do not get a Bachelor of Science, go and do a Bachelor of Arts in Science. And
Oh,
it really was pivotal. So to
yeah.
anyone out there watching, get that experience, do your internships, volunteer, because they really do add up. And it was so liberating because I was like, oh, and it changed my course of study. And that's how I got into the communications
Yeah.
aspect of it. It was, how do you connect people to it? Like I always say, professionally, I'm like the appetizer guy. Like the full course meal, I will lead you to it, but I'm all the tapas that, I will try different things. I will let you sample different entry points. I will lead you to the water. I will not give you the main course. Too much pressure. Uh, but, being that entry point, because I always have, growing up in a small town, I have that despite my extroverted appearance. I'm an introverted extrovert. So I always have that new kid at school feeling. So
Yeah.
I get to like kind of manifest that in a productive way and transition people from that same feeling I kind of navigate with. And it's fun too. It's fun to see light bulbs go off above people's heads.
Mhm. Do you have any like do you wish at all you got to pursue the more like academic research route, or do you feel like you get that sort of fulfillment in your role now? Like you are probably are doing research to some extent.
I am so grateful. I have many friends who are hardcore academia, and all of them are my ghost of Christmas future of the stress I could have held with me for the rest of my existence. So I applaud them. I love them. I'm a support system cheerleader for them. And I'm so grateful I get to look at them and be like, thank God I am not doing what you are doing. That being said, it's such a great question that you asked,
Mhm.
Meg, because I have supreme reverence, right? In this field, we love that exploratory process
Mhm.
and I get to manifest that with our team members here and our director in terms of the education programs that
Mhm.
we present. And we not only present them here at the meet, which is awesome in itself, we get to work with partners like the Broward County Library, as well as local resorts, retail, and whatnot. Again, even the outreach, it's different entry points of communication.
And a lot of way that is science, because you're
It
taking
is.
in
Yeah.
information and data and learning from it and then changing your results dependent on that data. So you are doing research just in a
You just
different way.
validated how that I'm successful. Thank you. That's one less topic for my therapist next week. So when she sees me more emotionally calibrated, I'm going to be like, "Do you know Meg? She studies octopi, and she's got the beat. She validated me." So
I can give you all the validation you need. I'm real good at it.
so I have a return question for
Okay.
you, and Bob, if you ever want to slow us down,
you keep going. You guys doing great.
So in terms of documentaries, I produced a smaller documentary in Kenya. So I've always had an interest in the filmic expression of, you know, factual studies. It's interesting to find a perspective and to somehow translate it. But when it comes to watching documentaries, I rarely watch environmental ones because that's my field, and I do more of, I hate to say it, but a lot of true crime, a lot of mystery. So, with your background of being interested in that part of media, like, do you have any favorite docs that aren't necessarily environmental or planet focused and are more that you just thought were really interesting?
Oh man.
My wife watches a lot of serial killer ones.
I mean, the serial
That's
killer
the
ones
one,
are great.
too. They're so good.
Really love the serial killer true crime documentaries. They're always fantastic. I think there was a documentary out about twins and the science, but I forget what it was called, but I saw it in theaters. And it was literally like about these two twins that were separated at birth and sort of the science and research that went behind them and into all the twin studies. So I think ultimately, like, I do like documentaries outside of nature, but I always lead back to sort of the science take of, like, I really enjoy learning the history of science and how, like, the scientific process has come, like the ethics of it and everything else like that. And then the nature documentary aspect, I think, is just where my artistic brain came in, because it was such what I was inspired by artistically in both, like, visual design and, like, images and things like that. And I think in a lot of them, there's such a heavy focus on the imagery and the story, because the story is important. But I was like, man, like, I want to come to a documentary for some, like, I want to learn. I want, like, the nitty gritty details. And I was like, as a kid, I was like, there is a way to give you the science and the story and the visuals while also being, like, factual and really nitty gritty details. And I think that was what I always really hated about science documentaries, is they always touch the surface. And I was like, I want to go deeper. And that's a lot of the parts of why I, didn't like my octopus teacher, because it was so surface level. And I think it's just what I wanted out of that documentary is different than what his goal was.
Right.
But yeah, it's hard to think of one specific documentary that I really love other than that twin one. That was just so great.
That's very cool.
It's crazy because there can be plot twists in real life that are more surprising, and just, it freezes you in your tracks to be like, this is not, someone did not make up this story. This is real life unfolding in real cuckoo cuckoo ways, and that's an interesting thing to take a look
Speaking
at.
along those lines, Daniel, I want to hear this story about how in the world did you get from Kenya? What were you studying in Kenya to make it to South Florida to be doing sea turtles?
So, in one interview, and I won't say I was hired by this organization, but I'll never forget, in one interview in Miami, the vice president was going through my CV, and she goes, "I have one question. How does this make any sense?" So I'm answering that question with you, Bob, and you, Meg. So I had first interned at Disney's Animal Kingdom, where I did all the conservation education programs. And I took that and I put off going to Kenya on a study abroad program with the School for Field Studies. And I loved doing that. And on a field trip, we went to this glass artisan compound outside of Nairobi. And it was real interesting. And so I was so captivated because I, too, find the arts, like you, Meg, super interesting. And I ended up going back. I just emailed the artisan and was like, I'd love to shoot a documentary. with you at your place, and that brought me out there for a couple weeks to do so. And then I came back, and as I was working on that, I was working at PBS Kids South Florida doing like PSAs that were educational and whatnot. And I loved that communication aspect of it, Bob. And while I was at PBS South Florida, we had to put together an advisory board of local community partners that would sort of curate all the educational messaging that we're doing. And in putting together that advisory board, I learned of, I was about probably 25, 26. I learned the value of what community partners and stakeholders actually are. And I just found that so enthralling because I kept looking at things from such a macro perspective. I'm a big picture thinker. But that really helped. And so that's what brought me into community engagement and outreach from media. I'm a big empath. So I missed that connection being behind a camera, which is very gratifying in its own way. As Meg knows, it's the reach of your art that is really exciting, that, you know, so many people are seeing it, which it's an awesome feeling. But I missed that immediate connection. And that's what brought me into museums. So I worked at Frost Science Museum. Previous to the Meek, I was at the Miami Children's Museum working with community relations and strategic partnerships. And I got a call from our now director of the Marine Environmental Education Center. And she's like, I have this opportunity. She's like, it's not ideally what you want, but I'd like you to interview with the team members. And before here, I never worked with sea turtles before. I've been very terrestrial, you know, charismatic megafauna everywhere. And then I was like, oh, sea turtles. You know, we need to diversify our messaging. And then I met them and I'm like, I'm in love with sea turtles. They're brilliant. And it's such, and Meg, I'm sure you can agree with this. It's an honor to stored after animals that travel sometimes hundreds of thousands of miles in their lifetime. And we have two that live in our pool, right? And you know, it's an honor to take care of them. We get to celebrate that awesomeness that we endure daily, which is infectious, right? It's our pay it forward. And that's my long-winded story, Bob, of how I got involved in that. Because I was all terrestrial stuff, but then coming here, I love these two turtles that we have, Captain and Kane. They just, for lack of a better term, they have such unique personalities. You know, you don't want to anthropomorphize or give them human characteristics, but they're so uniquely expressive, you know? And so we've had people from all over the world who kind of stumble upon us sometimes. And it's special because they're like, wow, we didn't know this place existed. And we even had a kid from upstate New York come by with his mom and dad, and he was like, after visiting Captain last year, I did a bake sale in Buffalo, New York. I raised $250, and we flew back just to literally hand us the $250, which is pretty cool.
So wait, the sea turtles, you did sea turtle work in Kenya?
No, and so there are sea turtles that go up through Madagascar, and that's a hawksbill turtle. In Florida, we have 5 species that visit our peninsula, and then 3 nest here: the loggerheads, the green sea turtles, and the leatherbacks. So when I was in Kenya, it was I studied all, it was, I hate to say it, but it was all like the archetypal stuff in addition to the smaller, but you know, elephants, wildebeest. I mapped the human wildlife migration corridor and changes using ArcVGIS technology, which was cool. And then we got to
doing research. You're like, oh, I have a bachelor's in arts and I didn't want to do science and academia. And I'm like, but that's what you're doing.
Don't you out me in this podcast, Meg.
You can't say ArcGIS and not say that you're not doing science.
And okay, so you might be right there. You know, I think it's so funny that you mentioned that, because I think all these years in, Meg, there's such a stigma of what hardcore science is, right? And even if it is the educational and communicational part of it, it's still, there's still sometimes a more hard drawn line in between them, like, oh, you're in education? Oh.
Which I really think is like a disservice to the people to draw that line, because it really separates what science is to everybody else versus
It
like
is.
academia, because in our everyday lives we use science to like pick a product that we like more than the other. Like it's truly just a method of understanding our world and our environment through data collection. And so to draw that line,
I love this introduction, and I love that I didn't know who I was going to be partnered with coming up to this
I had no
because
idea.
I feel like it's so unique coming from an arts background, whether it's filmic or painting, whatever our entry points were and are. It's cool to find each other because it feels like the unicorn sometimes. We're so unique in terms of how we've entered the field that it's nice to know that there are others who have done it in similar ways, and your process, though it's wrapped in some, different paper, our experiences are more alike, I think, than they are different, which is pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
How many continents have you been to yet, Meg?
How many continents?
Yeah.
One.
Or you're just staying out there,
Oh,
right?
no,
Yeah.
I've been to Iceland.
Oh, excellent.
I've been to
Nice.
Iceland, but
That's
other
on my
than that,
bucket
I've been
list.
in Mexico.
That's excellent. No, those are very good things. It
Meg,
was
to
more
make
of
you
a thing
laugh,
of I'm just amazed at Daniel's list here of like
I've only
I
been
did
to
this, I
Kenya
went there, I did this.
and England. And England was my layover. So like Meg,
Okay.
my big exotic place is one place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hope I get to do more, but also like, man, I'm 26 years old and very broke right now. So
Everybody.
Listen, I'm 42-year-old and very broke right now. So
though I will get to go to Japan because the Cephalopod International Advisory Council conference this year is in Okinawa.
that's pretty cool.
Oh,
yeah, and I use
awesome.
my art to raise money for me to go there.
That is an awesome thing.
So
What will you guys discuss at the conference?
And the links are in the show notes for everybody to go follow.
At the conference, it's about cephalopods abroad. So like in terms of like fishery sciences with cephalopods, different regulations within cephalopod science, and sort of like a broader sense of like communicating about cephalopods. But they do like a big span of a lot of things. In general, it's just like a conference in order to bring the international cephalopod community together in one place and to like have discussions about like the field as a whole and how like even the public is reacting to the field and what we want to put out. It's sort of just like a way to get all the cephalopod researchers together into one place. And
I have
they do
a
it every
stupid
3 years.
question for you, Meg.
Yeah.
Whenever I think about octopuses, I always think Pacific Ocean. Am I wrong on that?
They're in every ocean.
Okay.
Every
See, I
ocean.
never think about the idea that there might be an
freshwater,
octopus out back.
Yeah. I mean,
What's the coldest environment that they live in?
I mean, the deep sea. They're all the way at the bottom of the ocean. I mean, Dumbos and flapjacks, they're like all the way down there on that ocean floor in frigid water.
Okay. This is where we have to have you explain a term. Dumbos and flapjack?
Okay. So
The only flapjacks I know are pancakes. I guess maybe that's a northeastern term.
No, that's a great connection because that's exactly why they're called flapjacks, because they like to flatten themselves against the sea floor like little pancakes.
Oh.
And they're orange and they're very cute.
Okay, so there is a connection.
Yeah.
So Bob, we weren't too off in that. Bob.
I'm learning all sorts of stuff today.
So we have two different types of octopuses. We have our serrate octopuses and our inserate octopuses. Our inserate octopuses, which I really hope I don't mess this up because I confuse terms all the time, are our shallow water octopuses, and our serrate octopuses are our deep sea octopuses. We call them serrate because a lot of times their little suckers on their arms are like little cirri instead of like little suckers, so they have little filaments on them. And our serrate octopuses live down in the deep. They have no chromatophores, so they can't change their color. They a lot of times have a non-functional ink sac, so they can't use inking as a defense. And a lot of times they have little fins on their little heads. And that's where the term Dumbo octopus came from, because there's a certain species of octopus that has really big fins that reminded scientists of Dumbo. And so they called them Dumbo octopuses. Flapjack octopuses are another type of octopus that they flatten themselves against the sea floor, and so they reminded scientists of little pancakes, and so they were called flapjack octopus. But they are two different genuses of octopuses, one being Ophioteuthis and one being Grimboteuthis. But they live all the way down at the bottom of the ocean floor, very, very cold, very, very dark, which is why they don't need their chromatophores and they don't need their ink sac, because they don't see a lot of predators.
Okay, so maybe this is a smarter question. Because they
Yeah.
don't use colored, could they actually change in other ways, like because down there aren't the predators using like infrared, ultraviolet to hunt with? Could they change those? Is that possible? I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, so octopuses do see UV, so they can
Okay.
see UV or UV or polarized light. They can see the polarized light. And so maybe there is some way that they're using that, but from a specimen level of like, we've actually like captured these guys, brought them up to the surface, they don't seem to have the same skin ability that our shallow water octopuses have. So currently, maybe they are doing something else if they don't have the chromatophore color changing light. I don't think we have any evidence of that. But also
it's hard to get down there.
Yeah, it's hard to get down there. It's hard to like consistently observe them in a natural environment. It's hard to do a lot of things with them. And so there is a lot of questions that we just don't have the answers to.
Have you ever been in a submarine to like study them underwater?
No. No. I want
That's
to.
the next frontier.
My PI, my advisor, Kurt Onthink, has been down in the Alvin, and that is literally like goal of my lifetime. Is I would love to be in a deep sea submersible and go down there. I don't care if it's dangerous. I don't care if I could possibly die, even though they're really safe and we've been using them forever. And like, honestly, they go through lots of regulation and safety testing. I'm going to go down there. I want to go down there.
That'd be awesome. The library has this little submarine. We can go 300 feet down. And now it's just video. It's not any people inside.
I know. A lot of
And-
little robots.
Yeah.
And a shameless plug about that. Bob will actually be here next week at the Meek. We're going to explore putting it in our sea turtle pool for our World Oceans Day event. So as we want to extend those opportunities, we'll get to see the turtles under the water. And it's, marrying that tech with having a community event. So it's going to be pretty cool. So you can't go in that one, Meg. But at least you can live vicariously through that ROV.
Come on,
as
I
we
will-
test it
yeah.
out.
I am one of the people on those little ROV live streams that I'm like, this is my little parasocial relationship I got going on between.
If you make it
me
out here,
and
Meg, I'll
little
let you
ROV
control it.
He didn't offer me that, Meg. So you are,
I feel special.
as you should. See, I would have zero interest in going in a submarine.
Really?
Period. That's why I've studied and engaged with terrestrial animals, because I like having my feet on the ground. I don't want to be in the air. I don't like heights. I don't want to be too far in the water. Like, let me have my feet on the ground. I'm very boring outside of a larger personality type. I am, as long as I'm safely in bed watching Golden Girls at 9 p.m., that's the life to live. So, I mean, everybody has their dream.
I can't
With my cat.
with my cat. I love my 9 p.m. bedtime, but also I need designated water time. Like I need water time. I need at least like a couple hours a week that I have to be fully submerged in order for the brain to be happy. So
That's cool.
And we have the beach here, so I enjoy that spiritual recharge of being on the beach and going in the water. I'm just not a underwater person.
That's fair. I think I truly am an underwater person. Like the minute I picked up scuba diving, I was like, this is where it's at. I could spend all my time forever down here, especially on the Pacific coast with the kelp forest. I was like, I am in my own little universe of myself. The lighting is perfect. The kelp forest makes me feel magical. Like this is where I belong.
So what's your
I think
second
that's a better
favorite
thing
animal?
than doing the submarine.
What?
That's better than doing the submarine. If you're full scuba, that's better than doing the sub. I mean, we did.
You can't
when
go
we were in
as deep.
Australia on the Great Barrier Reef. We did one of those little submarine tours
Yeah.
down below, the little tiny sub things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think scuba diving would be better than that.
I don't know, but it's also the idea of getting to be down in an environment and
Yeah.
see it with your own eyes and like really experience what that's like, that I think like you just can't get from watching it on a little computer screen from a little robot. But in terms of what my other favorite animal is, I'd probably have to say nudibranchs. Or spiders.
Oh.
Like if I could not study the ocean, like if I could not study the ocean, I would study spiders.
That's pretty cool.
Do you not like spiders, Daniel?
Never, ever, ever. I am like, I'm being that I'm a little older. I'm going to reference a movie that
You're letting a movie dictate your feelings about an animal?
I am. So, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is probably my favorite movie on this planet. And I am basically Kate Capshaw, who is the ingenue who gets stuck in that insect bug room and is having a breakdown. That is me when I see things, though I try to give the illusion of strong male who is not succumbing to fear. I scream at a pitch known only to animals like dogs. So it's I'm not a fan, but I do have reverence for them. Like if I see a spider, I will try to cup it and release it outside. So I do try to give it a life and not literally squash its existence. Roaches are a different thing in South Florida. There's less tolerance for that.
Yeah, that's fair. Roaches can be a little frightening, especially when they fly at you. You know,
the flying ones, all bets are off.
Okay, so getting you off of the roach subject, but back onto the technology thing. One of the questions we always ask on the show is, what's the piece of technology you really wish you had to be able to do your job? What's the ultimate piece? If you got money is no object, what would you go out there and spend the money on?
Is this imaginary, or is this like real technology, or is it something
you make it up? You tell me. I had somebody tell me they wanted a time machine once, so you figure it out what you want. I do not have the money, by the way. I'm just asking in a hypothetical way.
So, Meg, you're not getting a submarine from Bob today.
God.
But if you want
that goal off my list. In terms of technology, I mean, I don't know. That's a really hard one. I would think like, sci-fi, if we're getting up there in the like hypothetical sci-fi, I think, it is kind of like the time machine aspect. Like I do want to, because like ultimately I'm really interested in cephalopod evolution. So like how cephalopods became the way that they became, which is why I'm so interested in RNA editing, because it plays a pretty big role in octopuses and squid and cuttlefish in general. And so going back to that time period, I think would answer a lot of questions. Getting those specimens would answer a lot of questions. But then on another level,
I'm smiling at the thought process that's going on here. This is
not
taken lightly. So,
oh no, this is like you have to take the question seriously. I mean, do you have any ideas, Daniel?
I'm always interested in time travel, but then I get very worried about two things: disrupting the temporal wavelengths and ending and changing things. Like, again, as a big movie fan, Back to the Future is a very stressful movie for me to watch.
Or just like the entire Doctor Who season.
I've never watched any episodes of Doctor Who, but I mean,
even I have watched at least one episode.
You need to be educated, Daniel.
I will give you this because my favorite.
Watch Torchwood. Torchwood's a nice introduction to the whole thing.
I'm going to give you both a show that on Netflix that I watched that was partially about time travel and so many other things. Watch Netflix Dark. It's a German produced show.
Wait, I've seen this one. Yeah,
it's 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And did you watch all 3 seasons?
I think I've watched the first 2. I don't know if I've watched the third.
You have to watch the final because it caps the whole story. And it is, Bob, after we get off of this podcast, that is your homework. You can watch 1 season a day. So by Monday, there's 3 seasons. It is by Monday, you have to watch all 3. But to answer Meg's question, I think the one that I would want to do, because I'm more conservative in my technological whimsy, I think if I had a one-person flying device that was safe that I could put myself and my cat in, I think I would do that to travel around at a not too crazy high up, but to be able to kind of see things from that airborne perspective
I
without
like
the
the
fear
personal
of
helicopter type thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Personal
it's pretty
drone.
neat, right?
Yeah.
That you can go to different spots and everything. And I think that would be a special way to get around.
So, last few minutes of the show, we always ask one question because you guys are super successful. You guys know what you're doing. You guys have got all sorts of great things.
Can you tell my mom that?
We will.
I was gonna
I will.
say,
I
was
will.
like,
I'll
wow,
send her a link to this
that's
right now.
super successful.
Um,
Thank you.
but I'm gonna go with Daniel first and give Meg a chance to think on this. Tell me what you failed at that changed what you decided to do and what you learned that way.
Oh my gosh, to only pick one failure in my existence?
No. I'm like, which family do you want to talk about?
I will say, Bob, I think that's an amazing question. And being Italian American, where we are forced into an abject sense of personal accountability for everything that we do, some call that guilt. I will say, I'm going to rework that into personal accountability. I think that, gosh, and I don't want to sound corny by saying this, but when I worked at Disney, and I'm a big Disney fan still, I was a big Disney fan leading up to, and I still celebrate their corporate methodology of how they train and do things. And one of the things there is that it's not just about the movies being this positive storytelling. They were not really allowed to use words like failure there. It's an area of opportunity. It's always looking at things. It's the same life we're looking at, right? It's exactly the same existence. When we wake up, we are seeing the earth in a specific way. But by changing the filter by which you see it and imbuing some sort of hope in it, and again, I know that sounds a little corny, but I think taking that perspective changed my perspective on what a failure is. And having that ideology that no matter what gets you down or that you failed at, and I've had some big failure moments. It really is recalibrating and thinking of things from a different perspective, kind of like bringing it full circle, like Meg and I started this podcast with, is from science communication perspectives, how do we pivot someone's mind? How do we get them to connect to something that can seem pretty hopeless, And so I would say, under the auspices of that question, it's less about a failure that changed my perspective and more about recoding what a failure is to renegotiate that cognitively and be like, how do you move forward from that moment where, gosh, you landed at the bottom of that pit, but you go right to, I'm going to learn a new way to crawl out. So it's that Indiana Jones
I like that
methodology.
Yeah,
Tell us,
and I'd say similar vein of what Daniel is getting at is my first instinct was I don't think a failure's ever changed anything. Like, failure is just kind of a natural part of putting yourself out there and trying to attempt to get opportunities that you really would like and feel like you'd be great at, and you're not going to get all of them. And that doesn't mean that anything should change as a result of a failure. Like, the failure is not really telling you anything about who you are, what your goals are, what your trajectory is. It's just kind of another step in the road. And I think what I found in how I've gained any, success that I have is because I didn't let failure change my trajectory. Because there was a lot of failure. It's really hard to get into cephalotop biology.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to do it.
That old saying about science is science starts when you go, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it really feels like my road has been, paved with failure, because I came in at it from, I was an artist who was not at all a school-focused person, went into hard sciences.
And I
had a lot of
think
stupid
that
things.
anybody who's listened to this last hour is going to think you're both insane for thinking that you have failed, because you guys are both super, super fun to have on.
I can give them rejection letters.
and I will share, and talking about what Meg is talking about, and it's perspective, right? Because we are in a field, it's a scientific field that we are in, right? And you learn, the animals that we talk about and the ecosystems that we talk about, we discuss them from a point of sustainability and then elevate that to a point of resiliency. Like how do you extend that beyond just keeping it moving to how do you encourage things that it's resilient, whatever that means, right? It's moving on its own, it has a new pace, it's renewed, it's more efficient, however it is, it's safer. And kind of like hearing Meg talk about that road to success paved with failures. I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Bob, it's that resiliency of, take that step and then move it forward, and maybe I'm going to be bold and say that maybe we have a more poetic interpretation of that given our arts background, but that's what keeps me positive. While science can be so black and white, and having that poetry, I think, kind of helps be leveled a little bit and keeping that hope.
Yeah, for sure. Because and I think what, when I was entering into the sciences, what was so maybe not fulfilling, but affirming was that science is failure. I learned that the whole process of doing science is you're going to have a tremendous amount of failure until you get that one good result. And so that kind of was, in a way, the poetic look at it was I'm experiencing tremendous amounts of failure, but isn't that what being a scientist is all about? So I think I'm doing okay.
You guys are both doing way, way, way better than okay.
And I, just to top off that, and Meg, I feel like we need to get each other's info from Bob, because this is such an enriching conversation. Really, it's so, I will say, I heard Bob's elevator pitch last month, and he goes, listen, people love it, just, it blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I even talked about today, I'm like, I'm a little anxious. And I mean, it's the most, Bob, you set something up so cool here, because, coming off of a 3-day weekend and the exhaustion of being back in the office, it's so encouraging, right? Even though this is our field and we choose to be positive and encouraging, it's so great to meet people who are like-minded but so different on a whole other coast.
And a whole other field.
And a whole other field, right? Because the other day, a kid turned to me and he's like, I don't understand. He goes, sea turtles have been here for millions of years and now they're endangered. He's like, what's the difference? And I go, and I said, and he goes, and I said, make a hypothesis. I said, you know what that is? And he's like, yeah, it's educated guess. Yeah, I got that. And he goes, humans? And I was like, and he goes, God, we're the worst. And I said,
but we're also the best. We're also the best. There's also evidence of humans positively contributing to nature and its conservation of it, and positively affecting the outcomes of species through our involvement. So we are the worst, but we also are the best.
And Meg, as you're saying that, my hair literally stood up on the back of my neck, because it's true, right? And I was like, though conservation, it seems like the part that we get is the reactive part, oh gosh, this is what we did, how can we fix it? I said, think about people, what we do, Meg. It's looking at the proactive approach, right? Mm-hmm. It's so much harder sometimes because our brain is reactive, right? But if we take the proactive step and take those couple steps back and be like, oh, wait a second, if I alter or evolve, I try not to use the word change, because then people are like, change?
Yeah.
But if we evolve our practices, one of the go-to statements I make here is small steps can make huge strides towards, shifts, and that could be an ideological shift, and that's what we get to do. Humans, it's less that, it's that we are the source of the problem, or that we have a lot of power. And, we get to tell the people that we connect with, whether it's a cephalopod convention or a family of 4 from Idaho coming to Hollywood, Florida, and stumble upon us, we get to let them know that the power exists in their hands and they get to do it. And it's a gifted situation, Meg. After all the things that we, have done and have the privilege of getting to do, that's a huge through line that we get to imbue daily. So
That's an awesome. That is a great way to end this today. Thank you both for being here for this. Your contact information, your sites are in the show notes for anybody to follow up on. And we will see everybody on Thursday for the weekly show. And next month, we'll find out. Have a great time, everybody.